my vision was in the next 15 years at the time is to put Armenia on the map of the world where you can grow any types of wine in Armenia. So if I'm successful in creating high value wine at attractive price, and when the world goes crazy about these types of wine and they're affordable, then I think we'll get lots of big names come to Armenia and invest, because of now they have a proof in the pudding that you can make excellent wines.
Sit back and grab a glass. It's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today, a beautiful Southern California day here, and getting into the holidays. About to have a conversation with Adam Kablanian, the CEO, you don't even say CEO, the founder and owner of Alexandria Winery in Armenia. Hey, have a listen to a show that just came out with Greg Lambrecht. Lambrecht, you can say it with Lambrecht. He is the founder and owner of Terroir wine preservation system. Incredible feat of engineering that came from his boredom with fusion. Yeah, building nuclear plants. Listen to that, but not while we're here. So glad to have you here, Adam. Thanks for coming in.
Well, thank you for having me. I hope we're not talking about fusion. Even though I studied physics, I understand fusion, but we're not going to talk about fusion.
No, we're not going to talk. But he did say, I got bored with it. He goes, it'll never work, but whatever he was working on. And he went into medical devices, and that turned into the Terroir button.
Yeah, I use it. Yeah.
It's a crazy good story. But we're not going to talk about him today.
Okay, super.
We're going to talk your history. You're in LA for a little bit, but you spent a lot of time in Armenia, and you've founded Alexandria Winery, which is, I think, a blend of your kids' names.
Alex is my son's name, and Andrea is my daughter's name. So Alex.
It rolls right off the tongue.
Yeah, I know. It's Alexandria.
It's beautiful. Yeah. And let's start with this. You just won, and I looked this up. I hadn't heard of the rodeo on cork, but it's just to give it, some reference. For years and years and years, the LA County Fair was the largest tasting in America for many years. And it was 2,500 wines. And so you can imagine now this rodeo, and I've heard some more about it since we talked about it, is over 2,800 wines. So it's a big tasting. And you came away with some accolades.
Yeah, I was really pleasantly surprised. Surprised is not the right word. My winemaker is a judge there, and he's been going there for several years. And Jeff Ritchie is an excellent winemaker, 30 years experience. He said we should submit our wines there. I said, why do I need to 6 of them? He says, let's send them all. So 3 days ago, we got the news that we got 2 double golds, a Riesling and white cuvee. We can discuss those later. We have 2 golds and 2 silvers, and 3 of the 6 is class champion within their price range and the type of wine. So, and these are all produced from second year vineyard. So this is not an old vineyard. This is not a mature vineyard. So
it's interesting because when the Americans beat the French in 1976 in the Judgment of Paris, people will argue that a vineyard has to be old. It has to be old vines are better than new ones. I think in general is probably accurate. But the Cabernet that beat the Bordeaux in that tasting was the first crop of that vineyard. Yeah, so I guess it doesn't always apply.
It doesn't always apply, but it does help, like when the roots take hold and goes deeper and extracts nutrients and extracts minerals, makes it more complex. But, in Armenia, we're lucky we have volcanic soil. You don't have to go really deep. The whole soil is volcanic, so it's rich in minerals. Yeah, very porous.
And vines like that.
Yeah, vines love volcanic soil.
So this tasting, let's kind of peel that back and dig into the marketing of wine, because this certainly many brands that win gold like this would probably go after later and put a sticker on the label, hoping that the consumer will see that on the shelf. But I think it's the beginning of part of the process. And you asked if this was a well-known tasting, and it is, as far as I can tell, and certainly by the size of it, it's reputable. And so now, what do you do with this information? I don't mean that as a question. what is it in general? What do we do this? What does your winemaker think now happens with these accolades?
Well, we also have obligation. I guess there is a tasting in February as a follow-up to this, and there's also some gala afterwards where officially the stickers and certificates will be kind of awarded. We haven't thought about how to market it, how to put the stickers. Definitely, we want to publicize it, but more importantly, it gives the team great confidence that this Vineyards had huge potential.
Yeah.
So that's really the most important thing. It's not so much the marketing angle. It's so that the path that we have outlined back 2017 when I decided to get into wine business, and the decisions we made right now is really proving to be the correct decision. Where we select the vineyard, the type of varieties we plant there. One of the things I did differently than other Armenian winemakers is that I decided to also make wines from international varietals.
Yes.
Which is not typical in Armenia. We have only Karas has some international varietals, but the rest of the wineries, the winemakers are only working with indigenous Armenian varietals, which is fantastic. I think we need to nurture that. We need to understand how to make better wines from these varietals. But my business approach and my outlook was a little bit different. I said, well, I knew that majority of my market will be outside of Armenia. So I want to start with labels, wine type that people recognize, like Pinot, Chardonnay, Riesling. And now they said, wow, this is from Armenia. And where is Armenia? Here's where Armenia. Oh, by the way, we also have indigenous, like RNE varietal. Oh, by the way, we're also experimenting with making cuvée between Voskhehad and Chardonnay, which won double gold, for example, in this competition. So we can now we have an opportunity to create unique wines that doesn't exist. It's like, ancient vines with, old world wines, combining them. One of my German winemakers I met says, oh, I see what your winemaker's trying to do is having East talk to the West. So it's kind of an expression of how this cuvée.
That's an interesting thought, and I want to touch on that. The New World wines and the style that you have. But it's an interesting thought that maybe from on a molecular basis, right, there might be some kind of agreement between the molecular structure of an old world wine from Chardonnay that's been there for 6,000 years and a Chardonnay coming from another part of the world. Who knows what's going on in there? But certainly when you blend wine, whether it's international grapes with indigenous grapes, or even there used to be wines in America where there was South American Cabernet blended with North American Cabernet, that there's some kind of synergy and that there's some kind of thing that we can't even explain that's going on in those wines just because we tried it. The wines I've had from you are very good, and what I tell people about them when I talk to them is that they're of current modern character, and that's what sells today. Is they have to feel modern. We were in Italy, and we went to in Piemonte, and we went to Barolo. We went to two distinctively different houses. One, my wife couldn't even stay in the cellar because it was so musty and moldy, and that's the character. And then the other one was just new, hip, bright, fruit-forward type wines. So it's just an interesting thought. But let's go back to the domestic varietals or the French varietals versus indigenous. Here's the way I see some of that. You've got unknown grapes, Chardonnay, Voskhehad, Kangun, and an unknown region, really. And you try to bring it to the world stage and go up ahead against Bordeaux, Burgundy, California, Napa, Sonoma, Central. I mean, that is a tall order.
It is.
I think by eliminating one of those variables, which is the indigenous grape names, and I had this conversation for the last couple of years with people in the industry, that you at least have taken some of the permutations out of the headwinds, or some of the things that might cause people confusion. So you say Chardonnay or Chardonnay Riesling or Riesling, that at least on the shelf, somebody might say, oh, this is interesting.
Yeah, Chardonnay from Armenia. Wow. Yeah. Let me try it out. And I know Chardonnay. I like, Chardonnay from Burgundy. I do like Chardonnay from Sonoma. But this is kind of unique. Never heard about Armenia. Well, I get also criticized by Armenian winemakers that I don't believe in the Armenian indigenous varietal. That I'm spending all this investment making wines that's not native to Armenia. And my reply to them says, look, it's a $10 million investment, which is large in Armenia scale.
Yes.
I said, how is it I don't believe in Armenians winemaking? And to me, one of the things as I took this journey and I understood that 95% of high quality wines is really to do with the terroir. Terroir. And so when I start looking at where to put my vineyards, so I selected 3 different distinct regions, 60 kilometers apart, 120 kilometers apart. So we have one in Broshan in Godijk, where I do all the, early reds and Pinot Noir and the white Riesling and Voskhod, as well as Muscat and Chardonnay. And then I have another region where those are all high elevation vineyards, 1,130 meters. So it gets lots of sun. And another
how high were they? How many meters?
1,137
okay.
one. The other's 1,100 meter high. The other one has also their volcanic. That's why I have all the Bordeaux varietals. The first harvest was this year for the Bordeaux varietal. So we will not see these wines for another year and a half. So in 2027, but they're developing very nicely, and the berries were fantastic when we picked them up. We kind of tasted, and there's good phenols there, and its potential is amazing. So what we have done is we matched the terroir, and not just the soil composition, to the type of varietal that does well there, and that's why I have international as well as indigenous.
Well, let's stop there for a second. A couple of things you said are very important, and it helps define some of this. And for the listeners, when you talk about 1,100 meters, about 3,300 feet, a little more than that, and you compare that to like Napa, which is like 700 feet, there's a substantial difference in altitude, which has a lot to do with the quality of the grapes and the way the grapes develop. But is that not a wine geek thing? It's not a question. Like if you're going down the supermarket aisle, you're not looking for which ones have the highest altitude unless you can't reach it because it's so high on the shelf. Hey, that was a good joke.
Yeah. I remember that.
But so it's important for us as wine people to recognize those things, because that's what goes into the grape and what goes into the bottle when you're doing it. But what's important to the consumer is, do I really like it? Is it really good value? And will I share it with my friends, or will I pour it at home? Like really, when I've tasted wine at the Wine of the Month Club every Tuesday, sometimes when I couldn't arrive at a decision as to what I would feature that wine or not, was, would I serve this at home? Would I be happy to have this for a guest that came to my home expressing something? And I think you're on the right path with that, because by examining terroir, phenolic ripeness, understanding what that vineyard is going to produce, you're going to produce an honest wine that expresses where it's from and why you made it in the first place. It's in the bottle already. And that resonates with people, I think.
Yeah, I think the essence of the wine is really the terroir and all the conditions that gets summarized at the harvest time. Of course, harvest picking is important when you pick them and how often you pick them. So we usually harvest over 3 weeks. So we don't pick all the grapes from the same vineyard, same type, all the same. If it's not ripe, then we leave them on the vines for a little bit longer, because we want as much hang time as possible with high altitude. High altitude wines is very difficult because the sun is really developing the sugar level very, very fast.
Daily,
so you need
almost,
to,
right?
You have to. So we don't have the opportunity in the vineyards. We have long hang time, so we need to manage it. So one of the things we've done, it has a small effect, but every little thing helps. So we had this anti-hail nets that we put just for hail, because we do have hail in Armenia, but we leave them on throughout the whole harvest season, just to reduce the effect of the sun.
So they actually do some canopy work with
exactly
that.
a little bit, a little bit,
Yeah, a little bit.
maybe 5%, but every
Whatever
little
it
thing
is.
else.
Yeah.
So you need to really measure, be precise, pick the right time, and that's really what takes in terms of producer, well, the winemaker, and it comes into picture, making decision how to segregate the different lots, the ones on the slope, harvest them differently than the ones a little bit down on the plain, and sometimes we have like 12 different varietals we're working like this harvest because we had the Bordeaux. We had like 35 different bins.
Wow.
And so in February, when I go back to Armenia with Jeff, we will sit down and start experimenting blends, what to do, which one and which lot. Of course, we're also doing the cuvée, so we need to decide the percentage of Chardonnay and Bosquehat for our white cuvée. So lots of measurements, lots of tasting. And if we're not sure, we go back to it again, and we invite other people in Armenia who have good nose to give us feedback. So we have no ego. We just want to make the best wine.
Let's
we
go
just
back
want
to
make
that
the
for a
best wine.
second. And that's a whole, probably 1 hour conversation to say, we just want to make the best wine. And this is one of my challenging questions. I don't want to get into it right now, but which is, what does that mean? Where are we at? Is it expression? Because I have this definition, which has been circulated amongst some of the French people I've had in here, which is there's really no bad, if you are successful in doing what you just said, then there are no bad vintages. Because if you express the vintage, what you were given by the soil in a proper way without diluting it and messing it up on the way out into the bottle, then you've done the right thing. And yes, 2014 in Bordeaux may not be as interesting as 2015, but it's an honest wine. It's not a bad vintage because it expresses the time and place, right? That's my definition of that. Now, but you said something important, ego. When the wine industry in Armenia started to evolve, and after freedom, and then the little technology came in, and then people understood what was going on, and we kind of got away from what was being produced during the Soviet era into now modern winemaking techniques. There was that big expression of, well, we're Armenia. We're proud of what we are. And we have Chardonnay, and we have these grapes, and, Noah landed his ark on Mount Ararat. And, the marketability of that it's full of headwinds. Was that one of the initial headwinds, like the winemaking symposium, so to speak, in Armenia was saying, look, we want to be Armenian only, and they thought you were nuts besides your $10 million? I mean, is that a huge headwind?
It's a huge headwind because I remember when I first started going to Armenia in 1998, I used to have a tech company branch office in Armenia. That's when I was first exposed to Armenia. I could not drink any of the wines that was produced in.
What year is that? 98?
98.
Well, I couldn't drink them in 07. So.
Yeah. Well, I think things start getting better after 2012 with Armas coming up with state-of-the-art, winery with indigenous varietal Karas. Vahe Keshkerin did fantastic job in spearheading and believing the terroir of Armenia and others. Right now, we are producing good quality wines. Still, I believe we still have ways to go. For example, Armenia has the potential to be as good as Pinot Noir. Really, but the problem with Armenia is there are different types of Armenia, and we don't understand how to manage the canopy. We don't understand, how to grow it. We don't, still lots of experimentation needed to reach its full potential. There'll be another 10, 15 years before, but it does have that potential, which is very, very exciting.
Yeah,
I'm somewhat taking the easy path by doing Pinot Noir and Chardonnay because those are proven, but Armenia has a fantastic potential.
I don't think they're proven. I mean, you have to,
as a varietal,
but not in
3,000
feet, and with volcanic soil that's completely different than the one it grew in.
That's true. Yeah.
I don't think that's true at all. But I think Michel Roland had told Julia at Karas, years ago when they first started. He's like, okay, it's suitable, but we won't know for 100 years. That's how long he feels it's going to take to understand these grapes in these areas.
Yeah.
So I think what Armenia has done in this short amount of time is pretty amazing.
It is amazing. And then I think, but also people, think that Armenia has been making wine continuously for all these ages. It's not
Yeah,
true.
right.
I mean, it's not true. I mean, there was a big disruption since the Soviet time because the vineyard management is really made for cognac. Just give as much water as possible because the farmers are selling those to the cognac factory,
Right.
by the kilos. So they're not really focusing on quality, managing the yield. So it's a completely different approach, to winemaking. But that's slowly changing. And now, I say that our wines are actually better than the Georgian wines. Georgian wines had fantastic marketing from the Soviet times. It was known to produce wine in the Soviet Union, so it had the head start in terms of marketing and in terms of exposure. But I think Armenia is catching up very fast.
Well, that's an interesting thought. Even I just heard, where was I listening to? Oh, there was a woman on yesterday. I was on LinkedIn. There's a PhD Italian wine person in Italy had a Turkish wine specialist on, and I wanted to see it. Now, I don't know if viewership is a litmus test on how interesting your show is, but I was the only one watching on LinkedIn. It says how many viewers there are.
Is the one.
But I want to hear what she had to say. And this woman was defending the Turkish wine industry, though it's not Appalachia and all those kind of things. Then she and I asked about Armenian wines to see what she would say. And she said, which I've heard before, like there was no Armenia, no Turkey, no Iran, no Georgia at the time that wine was, sort of founded. Let's just assume it was 6,000 years ago. So you really can't say that Armenia was the first country to do this, but it was certainly in our neighborhood, right?
Correct.
That we thought
There
of.
was a triangle there between North Iran, Georgia, Armenia, and Eastern Turkey, Van region. Actually, the Urartus, the ancient kingdom in the Lake Van area, actually they understood the value of terroir. So in fact, they wanted to expand their wine production. So they sent emissaries all the way to Vineyards, Armenia, to explore new terroir. And that's where they identify Vineyards as being fantastic. So this is like going back 4,000 years.
That's pretty interesting.
It's very, very interesting. Then I gave a keynote speech on Silicon Summit in Armenia. They asked me to combine AI with wine. How can AI can be used to produce good wine? So I did some research. I dig in. So those are the information I found. And the conclusion I came was it's very difficult to use AI to make better wine. There's 30,000 substance components in the wine. When you evaporate it, how do you change that? How do you modify it? However, what I've learned is that the terroir is the key, and not even the grape varietals. They're really the terroir.
No, terroir drives
everything.
All.
And then the French recognized that in 1855 when they did the Grand Classification. The Urartus 4,000 years ago they recognized that. I experienced that when I was looking at the vineyards, what to grow, and the nature of the terroir. So
I think actually the monks of Burgundy figured it out. And I think it's probably the most classic example where you have these 1 hectare and 2 hectare vineyards where the next row over is a different wine just because the terroir is so different.
Exactly.
Which is one of my fascination with Burgundy right now, which costs me plenty to understand.
It's expensive.
So what did you? I mean, you're in the tech world, and so many people come to this industry for a lot of reasons, and I think most of the time, at least earlier on, like in Napa, they make their money in being a government contractor or a surgeon, and then they seek this lifestyle of wine. And in America now, because it's so expensive to do, this is, for example, if you and I went to Napa today and tried to buy land and make a wine, we probably couldn't sell it for less than $200 a bottle just to break even.
Exactly.
So what allured you to this? When you went to Armenia for the tech side first and you saw this industry, or you were a wine lover prior, or what happened?
I've been a wine lover since I guess I graduated from college. I mean, I did not do binge drinking. It was just mainly with food. And my wife and I always enjoy a glass of wine, a bottle of wine. 40 years ago when we started. Somehow, I found myself pulled into wine. Every time we travel, I seek wineries to go and figure out, what type of wines they have and how do they make their wine. How is the wine, is part of their culture. So there was kind of interest that grew over time, but main focus was really technology. I'm I'm a microchip designer, studied physics. Then my master's was in chip design and started a company in Silicon Valley in 1996 called Virage Logic. And man, in 4 years, it was just amazing success. We went public with corporate funding. We had one corporate investor 2 years into the operation. And 9 months before going public, I had my first venture money.
Wow.
And then within 9 months, we were public. So all of a sudden, I found myself, with broken English, being a CEO of publicly traded company. So it was like I was drinking from the fire hose, learning about sales, marketing, because, I come from engineering background. And so that was very transformative. So the reason I went to Armenia in 1998, because I could not find qualified engineers. Or when I found them, they didn't want to work with this kind of startup that nobody knows, and Adam is not a proven CEO. I'm not going to spend time. This was during the dot-com.
I can see that. Yeah.
The dot-com bubble. It was, I couldn't find anybody. So I decided, okay, let's go to Armenia. So I went to Armenia, and it was a gem. I found so many talented experts, not necessarily in microchip design, but they're well-trained scientists, well-educated, PhD level, master's level. They didn't have jobs and they didn't speak English. So I took a bet. Said, well, I always look at quality of people, not necessarily the experience they have. If they're good people, I categorize them as there are three different types of people when you want to hire. One that you want to hire are the ones that you don't give them any input. They continuously produce, because they understand the environment, how it's changing. They're coming with ideas, working with customers, working with colleagues. The second type, I call it the B type, you give them an input and you get some output. The third one we never want to hire, which is like you give lots of input, nothing comes out. So in Armenia, we find there are several of those, yeah. So in Armenia, we find the first, however, we need to train them in communication. We need to retrain them into microchip design. And that was the best investment I made. So over time, we hired 150 specialists. Within 3 years, they were designing chips that went into the first iPod that Apple introduced. There's 3 components made in Armenia in 2001. 2001,
So let me stop there for a second.
So that's kind of how I got hooked. It was not about wine. It was about technology, yeah.
But the intellectual, let's just touch on that, because there's with TUMO, which for the listeners is a school for young kids. It's started in Armenia. They have one in LA now. They have one in Paris. There's others where they're teaching kids tech, all different parts of tech. Is there truly a bank of intelligence, intellectual intelligence, tech intelligence, regionally focused in Armenia? Meaning, can we claim, we mean Armenians, say that we have this amazing quiver of people that's different than any place in the world, that the Americans don't necessarily have it. They have more people, but the concentration of engineers that can handle this kind of work is quite obvious in Armenia. Is that accurate?
It is accurate, and that is due to the Soviet system. Even though Soviet did not emphasize making wine in Armenia, Armenia was the Silicon Valley of the Soviet Union.
I see.
So like they were replicating PDP-11 computers there, and there's an institute called Mergelian for 5,000 mathematicians and computer scientists working there. The air defense system of the Soviet Union was designed in Armenia. So there was a huge focus on the education in Armenia. So we are benefiting from that after the collapse of the Soviet Union.
That's so
and that tradition is kind of continuing with in a different, way, more like with the rest of the world. We have over maybe 1,000 startups there, some well-established companies like NVIDIA, Service Titan, and AMD, they all have branch office in Armenia.
AMD's there too. Huh?
AMD is there. Everybody that, well, Facebook is not there, but really people in deep tech that to do with Synopsys, like Virage Logic, we sold the company to Synopsys. And because Synopsys was interested in purchasing us after we went public, they found out about Armenia when they were doing due diligence. And they said, wow, you guys have a gem there. We've been trying to find a stable workforce. And we went to India, we went to China. The numbers are big, but the turnover, the attrition rate was like 20-25%. It's not sustainable. When they looked at our attrition rate, it was like 1%, and mainly because people migrating to Canada, but there's nobody else, that they were kind of jumping ship to go and work some else. So they made an investment. We did not reach a deal at the time. Then they went ahead and start hiring people on their own. And in 2010, they came and purchased us anyway.
That's really interesting. So that's what.
And we have 45 to 50,000 tech workers in Armenia, contributing 7 to 8% of GDP. In 1998, when I went there for the first time, it was Sam Simonian, Tumo, and ourselves, Virage Logic, and there was another company called HPL. It's only 3 of us. And we're getting the best talent because,
So 91 was freedom. And I'm thinking my in-laws bought the Ani Hotel about that time. And their thought process was they thought they were helping. They actually thought this was a philanthropic thing to do. And that whole period, maybe up until 98, maybe it was lasted past 98, is when the diasporans were investing and people wanted to buy vineyards and they were getting their ass kicked, right? I mean, my mother-in-law came out with a profit, like is it almost as a Western investment. They made decent money on it. And I don't think that was the norm then.
No, that was not the norm.
People were taking advantage of everything. Now, I think that's maybe it's still around a little bit, the corruption, whatever, but that seems to have settled down and that has filtered through. And now we have people like you and solid investments in solid industries doing solid things to benefit not only Armenia, but the world as well when it comes to that. Do you think then that the rise in the cultural appreciation of wine is partially because of this investment by people like you coming to Armenia and educating people?
There is that effect because now we have increased the standard of living because the tech companies are paying well compared to the local other non-tech workers. So now many of the tech workers are very affluent. They can spend money on wine and stuff. So that's part of it. Part of it also lots of due to the Ukraine war, lots of Russians and Belarusians and Ukrainians came to Armenia. They brought in the actually good culinary culture. The restaurant qualities improved. The first wave was when the Syrian Armenians came and they improved the quality of the
food's great.
And now the Russians came, actually, they took it to the next level. So right now it's thriving gastronomically with the quality of wine improving. So the other advantage about Armenia that has it's the land is cheap. And one of the reasons, you asked me a question, why not start a winery in Napa? In fact, I looked into briefly, and I met this gentleman who had 8 acres, and he was producing, high quality. He wants $8 million. I said, 8 million. And then, oh, by the way, I want to get the grapes and make wine, so you can only sell me the grapes. I said, you must be crazy. I mean, I'm going to put $8 million to sell you grapes.
Yes, no.
Not interested. Thank you.
They say the rough number is per tonnage. Let's say it's 8,000 a ton, which is not expensive these days.
Yes.
Let's say you're paying 15,000 a ton. Then you just drop off the zeros, and that means the minimum bottle cost, say at retail cost, is going to be $150. And that's just, it's unsustainable. I think in today's market, it's gotten really, really complicated. And sort of why I was defining the position that your wines are coming into the marketplace. And I've clearly defined in my head through sorting through all this that there's just that collector mentality and then the rest of the market. And so the collector mentality probably should stay the course, should probably continue to market to its, like some of the best advice I ever got, which was from Kevin O'Leary when he was on the show, and he and I spoke a few times after, which was, You got to stay the course of what Wine of the Month Club is and sell your customers who trust and believe in you more of what they want, instead of trying to get onto the marketplace and slug it out with people who have more money and more SKUs to offer and all kinds of, avenues to go that you don't have. So I thought that very interesting. But why did you do this then? What you became aware of wine during your .com bubble, and it's part of a cultural, an interesting part of life. Not everybody takes to it. I think everybody would and should take to it because it's an expression of humanity, in my opinion, an expression of civilization. But what happened with you?
It's really an extension of the culture and the land and the people. You're basically, when you have a bottle of wine, the essence of the soil it came from is in that bottle, right? So for me, it was, I was looking to kind of slow down and from the tech world, and said, okay, 2017, when I decided to seriously get into creating vineyards and start the process. And my vision was in the next 15 years at the time is to put Armenia on the map of the world where you can grow any types of wine in Armenia. It doesn't have to be the indigenous. So if I'm successful in creating high value wine at attractive price, and when the world goes crazy about these types of wine and they're affordable, then I think we'll get lots of big names come to Armenia and invest, because of now they have a proof in the pudding that you can make excellent wines. And I think part of the problem with the wine industry, again, I'm not expert in the wine industry, and I may be wrong here, is that it gotten so expensive that many newcomers can't afford to buy a bottle of wine in a restaurant for $90 just to drink it.
Yeah.
It's just not affordable for the new generation. So if we can make high quality wine at affordable prices, I think there is room for growth. There is room for getting new people into the wine culture.
There is. There always is. And this is why my optimism in the industry is based on that, and the fact that there is every generation eventually comes to this glass of wine, and because of its real expression. And all the things you see in the supermarket are launching points to get to some other point. Now, people all stop at some character of wine that they decide this is how far as I go. But even my best friends who were stuck on certain brands in America, which are the types that have a high residual sugar, that are on the shelf everywhere, and they're very popular, have gotten bored with them. And I had a master of wine on the show, Tim Hanai, who talks about that they've able to identify this phenomenon and trace it back to sugar content, that people get bored of that in their palate, and the complexity, which comes from what you're saying, which is the terroir. That's where the complexity comes from. That's where the expression of humanity comes from. It's where we feel something when we have a properly made wine, is because of that. Can't explain it, can't identify it, can't codify it. It just is. And I think that's the optimism of wine. When you put it in a can, in fact, I'm going to I just found some canned wines here. Now, about 5 years ago, maybe it was 7 years ago, I did a canned wine special, and I tasted probably 150, 200 different canned wines, and found some that actually were pretty decent wines, but not meant to be drunk after a year, right?
Yeah. So
but I found these, they're probably 5 years old. So I'm going to do a video of me opening.
I'm interested because I'm looking into ways to attract the generation Z into the wine, and they're drinking lots of stuff with cans. And if I can make high quality wines affordable in a can to get them going, to get them in, that may be a way for us to. But I don't know. I have not looked at the trend yet.
We can just hash out a little bit. I have noticed in our local markets that the can section is getting smaller. On the other hand, I had a guy on the show from Cornell whose job was, as a PhD, to find a better lining for the cans. The Coca-Cola line, whatever they can't line the cans with for Coca-Cola, it doesn't work with wine.
You have to have a special. Yeah, you have to special.
Eat at it. Which is amazing, because you put a tooth in a bottle of Coke and it dissolves it, right? But so all that's happening. I don't know. This is a difficult decision to make as a winery owner, that you're going to spend and decide to invest in the alternative packaging, the alternative methods, non-alc. That's an investment that you have to decide, well, I think there's enough market there for me, and I think I can build a brand, Alexandria, around a non-alc sparkler or a non-alc whatever. There's a whole different department. It's a whole different marketing program. It's a whole different branding program versus what you've done is create quality wines at a price range that people can afford. And there's a sweet spot, $23 or $30, $29.
Between 20 and 30, depending on,
It's a sweet spot right now. That's crept up over the years. But so that's a tough decision. And that's something you have to sit down with your people, decide, like, is there a marketplace? If you watch LinkedIn, you think that non-alc wines were the biggest things in the world, but
they don't taste.
Oh my gosh, most of them are
alcohol.
horrible. I did have one the other day. It was pretty decent.
Yeah, I mean, might as well just drink juice. So to me, I'm not really deviating from my plan in terms of doing non-alcoholic wine, because really
cans or whatever.
Cans, I want to wait a couple of years. I want to continue studying it, figuring out, because it's really, if there is a way I can deliver the same quality wine in different format that's more accessible to the younger generation, why not?
Mm-hmm.
But right now, I'm not ready to make that decision. Plus, I do have, from cash flow point of view, I'm building a winery. I started an architectural plan, so I need to invest there. I also need to invest in the sales and marketing channel in the U.S. and abroad. So I'll be busy for the next 3-4 years, kind of building the different channels for distribution and also making the winery. So I think at some point in time, it will be unwise to ignore the trends. I mean, but we need to be careful, because that requires huge investment in terms of bottling line, in terms of you distract the team, and it's not clear if that's. So I'm going to stick with what I started, making it affordable in the price range and making exceptionally good wine, and we can go from there.
I think that's wise.
Yeah.
You're right. The investment to do cans has been huge. I used to sell copiers in the old days to the people that used to can 7-Up. Those machines were huge and much different now. But there's a woman out now, her name is Abby Bogle. She has produced a company called Small Lot Bottles, and she will take on short runs and put things in cans, put things in 100 ml bottles, all kinds of different formats. And it's kind of a brilliant little thing for wineries to experiment with the format size to see if they want to go further into a larger production. But let's talk about that. You're building a winery. I don't know if you know that my wife's cousin is James Tufenkian. That's
James is a very good friend.
He's Sandra's. My wife's a Tufenkian.
I know that. Yeah.
Her dad's first cousin is James's father, I think. And I've had him on the show a couple times. And so he started that wine tourism hotel. I'll tell you a quick story. It's crazy in Armenia, but he's suspended it right now. But let me tell you this really crazy story. We were in Paris, and we decided to jump over to Porto, and we're sitting at a cafe in Porto. And we hear this people speak Armenian, and my wife introduces herself in Armenian. Turns out that guy was the architect on the Armenia hotel that James
was building.
Yes, we're in Portugal. Oh. We go back to Paris for a few days. We go to a different cafe. We're sitting in a different place. Another couple speaking Armenians, William Saroyan, 2 Armenians get together anywhere in the world, right? And he worked for James on that hotel as well as an architect. Is that bizarre?
It's bizarre. Right now, nobody's working in that hotel.
Well, nobody's working. So let's talk about that. Wine tourism. I've had Lile Gregorian on the show. I've had Zara Muradian on the show. And we're talking about, and I think this is a firm approach all over the world, not just in Armenia. One of the things that wine has, and you've already said it, when they go travel, you look for wineries. Wine tourism is a huge thing. And I think it has a lot to do going forward with the experience of wine. Like when I take friends on the road, we go to wineries. That's what I do. Why wouldn't I? And I think travelers all over the world are seeking that. Is that what you want to do with this winery? And is there a concerted effort in the Armenian trade to create wine tourism?
Definitely, there is an interest in and to pool resources between the different winemakers to promote Armenia as a winemaking region, and not each winery is, promoting their own, because it's very, very expensive to promote Armenia through one winery or two wineries.
I'm glad to hear that.
So, but we have not succeeded yet, and we don't have the necessary budget to promote Armenia as a wine growing region. So it probably requires 10 to 15 times more resource allocation than it is today. So it's something Zara's been struggling with, and I don't have a solution to that. It has to come from the government. The government says the right things, but when it comes to and the time comes to put money in the budget, it's not there. The winery I am building or will build right now, I just have plans, and those plans are going through modification. So the winery I will build will be the closest winery to Yerevan, the capital.
Oh,
And
so closer than Boskavaz?
closer to anybody else.
Huh.
So it's going to be minimalist design, Napa style winery where people can have tasting. I'll have restaurants. I will have, gastronomic event, wine pairing. I have a conference room for corporate event.
Wow. Excellent.
It has a prime location, not just because it's the proximity to Yerevan is like 15 kilometers. So within half an hour, you can reach my winery.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is to attract all the day tourists that come to Armenia for 3-4 days, 5 days, 6 days, and they want to have a taste of Armenia, the winery. They will come to my winery because they don't have half a day or full day to go to
Armas is
Valletta.
2 hours.
Armas is an hour, but once you put everything together, then
it's
then
3-4 hours.
3, 4, 5 hours, right? So my idea is not idea; it's just because of the location. I would be attracting lots of tourists, business tourists, day tourists, to come and get a taste of Armenia. So that's kind of a plus on my side.
Yeah.
Because I have also 3 different vineyards, 3 different terroirs. One of my ideas is to grow Armenia in 3 different terroirs, and then have our visitors taste Armenia from the same vintage from 3 different terroirs. Again, expression of the terroir.
Sure. That's a great idea.
Yeah, and so that's kind of what I'm doing with Alexandria Winery in terms of promoting tourism and experience. And I agree. James and I had lots of conversation about wine tourism, and because of the war, unfortunately, the whole project got stuck a little bit, and it's very close to the border. I think James, I cannot speak for himself, but he wants to have some guarantee from the government, or that there will be peace agreement finally, and then he can go continue build.
The first time we went to Armenia was 2007. Wines were still undrinkable. I had the Armenian pride issue. You had to tell the guy it was really good, but it was really a little undrinkable. And I was talking to Miriam Sakatalian on the show, and she said, I tell them when they come in and bring a wine that this is no good or this needs this before it's palatable. And I said, that's so interesting, because in America, I would never do that. Even after 35 years of tasting every Tuesday, I would still, if the winemaker was in, or the winer, maybe because it's a more mature market, if the winemaker or the if it was a representative, no problem. But if the proprietor or the winemaker was there, I would just tell them, this is very interesting, and I would just fluff it off, because these guys made a huge effort. In Armenia, they're just starting in some cases, and some of the stuff still isn't that great. But, anyway, the point I was going to make was I had a studio in Civil Net's place downtown Yerevan, and I saw James, Mariam, and Vahe Kushkarian, who I've known since the 90s. So I had never met James before. And I knew he was a New York guy, and somehow my sister...
When was this?
This was the 2 trips ago, so probably like 4 years ago. Okay, 3 or 4 years ago. So I shook hands. I know he knows I'm married to his cousin. And I know that my sister and him crossed paths in Princeton or New Jersey or somewhere in New York. So he sits down. I go, so nice to meet you. Let's talk a little bit before we turn on the mics. And I said something, and he goes, let me tell you something. The biggest regret of my life is not marrying your sister. And I'm like, what? Like, where did that come from? I had no idea that was even in anybody's mind. My sister's story, I didn't know who he was. So it didn't matter. But I thought, wow, what an interesting way to start a conversation. So, because when we were down that way, I actually got out of the car and tasted wine at one of the kiosks. One of the women selling wine.
Oh, this is like an Armenian.
Another
Yeah,
area,
yeah, yeah.
yes. And that's kind of where this
Yeah,
hotel is.
yeah. I think we raised funds through One Armenia, which James and I are founding board member with Patrick Sarkisian. We wanted to promote the villagers to make local wines. So we fundraise and we created kiosks for them to go and showcase that. So that's probably where you guys stopped.
Yeah, so I'm with the director and producer of these things I produced, and I'll send you the link, from CivilNet, and he goes, you have to taste them. I go, come on, man. Now, my dad taught me early on, you taste everything you can get your hands on, whether you smell problems with it or not, you just got to taste it because you'll never learn the flaws without tasting the flaws. And I taste this wine, I go, you know what? This stuff is okay.
This is okay.
Yeah, it was no major flaws. It was, it wasn't exciting, but I could drink it. Probably wouldn't. The funny part was, it was in a 2-liter Coke bottle.
Yes.
And I said, I want to buy some of that. I don't need 2 liters. So she went in the back and brought out a 1-liter Coke bottle and put a funnel in and poured the wine in. And I took it. And I go, well, that's interesting.
I remember I was in Artsakh in 2018 before the war, and I was doing kind of jeeping and hiking in remote areas. And we had we went to the supermarket, got wine. It was in 2 liters in. Yeah. It was fantastic. Yeah, it was Fendomi, Syrian. It was fantastic.
So I
know we paid like $2 or $3. It was amazing. Yeah,
it's not bad. Well, we're almost out of time here, and we could probably talk longer. But what is the plan then in the U.S.? We were talking about the issues, and I don't know if they're worldwide. Maybe you can reflect on that. You're aware of what happens here. We've talked about the consolidation of distributors, the 3-tier system. When I was in Puglia, Italy, 3 weeks ago, I did a podcast with a wine called Amano. I looked on my database. I had tasted it a few years ago. He's completely pulled out of America. Just doesn't want to deal with it anymore because it was just his marketplace, the amount of effort. He was taking the hit in revenue, but his margins were better. Have you seen that elsewhere?
Well, I'm right now selling in Armenia and the U.S. I have a small distributor in Russia, but Russia, for the foreseeable future, is not a market for us because they're looking for cheap alcohol and
for Alexandria, not necessarily Armenian.
Yeah, there are lots of Armenian wines like for $2, $3, $4. It's being shipped to Russia, and that's fine, but that's not really my market. The buying power is not there. Many Russians are not going to restaurants just because of the war and there's, inflation, high inflation. So it's going to take 5-6 years before it recovers, in my view. So my focus is really in the U.S. because it's a big market. My price point is attractive. I understand the U.S. market. I have lots of contacts, and so far I was able to convince 4 or 5 high level Armenian liquor shops here, Mission,
Remedy,
Wines of Armenia, and Remedy, to carry my wine. There's a new winery, wine shop called Guinea and Glendale. They also they carry all my wines, and he was very, very happy. Of course, I'm looking for distributors. I do have one distributor signed up in Virginia, International Sellers. So I sent the first pallet 2 months ago, and they're selling, and so I'm hopeful that will expand. I have another distributor I signed, a small distributor in New Jersey, but that shipment will happen next year in March. I'm working with a distributor in Houston, Texas. They have 2. So they're interested in our wines. We agree on a price, and then I'm waiting for an order. And now I'm looking to expand, not just where Armenians are really live, but throughout the U.S. And one of the other ideas I have is to have a Shopify type store on my web where I can ship wines through using somebody else's network through different locations, so people start tasting, because I believe the wines Alexandria is making are attractively priced. They're excellent wines, and people will buy it.
They are, I thought, solid, like I said. And plus, not only that, they were New World in character.
Yes,
and I thought that was important. Well, fascinating. And I know we'll do this again.
Thank you. Well, I think we'll do it in a year. We'll see where we are if you have the
we'll catch
time.
up on
And
it.
yeah.
It is a slow industry, right? 1 year is one harvest in this kind of
Well, so one of the things I learned coming into the industry, like being more patient, because in the tech industry, things move fast. Like I send an email to somebody, within half a day or a day, maximum 2 days, I get a reply. In this industry, I send an email and I get a reply like a month from
you never know.
You never know. It goes, and sometimes it shows up, and so it's very, very interesting. The tempo is very different.
That was, but one of the greatest business lessons I ever learned when I first started this. I was a punk kid. I didn't know what I was doing. That's in 1975. That picture when I was working in my dad's wine shop. But there was an importer. His name was Henry van der Voort. He was a Bordelaise. He owned a winery, a chateau in Pauillac at the time, and I didn't know how much pedigree this guy had as a human. I just knew him as a guy trying to sell me wine. And the company was called Burkhardt van der Voort. He did a lot of Rhone wines, a lot of Bordeaux, had his own brands. And one day, he wanted to sell me a wine called Li Pouilly, which was a wine that he vinted for Chinese food. So it was Riesling and Gewürztraminer based, that kind of thing. And I was being a punk kid, buyer, and I wouldn't return his calls. Only when I felt like it. And he finally called my dad. Now, my dad was Cairo born, English bred. He was a very proper guy. And in French, they spoke in French. He says, "Your son needs to give me the courtesy of a response."
Yes.
And that's one of the greatest lessons I ever learned. It was from a wine person, because whether the response is yes, no, maybe, or I'm thinking about it.
It can be short. I'm not interested. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good luck. I mean, it doesn't take much effort, right?
No, it's a response.
I also highly regard people who respond. It's okay. You're not interested. Just say,
just say something. And I brought that up the other day with Bartholomew Broadbent, whose father was one of the greatest wine critics in the world. And he looked at me and he goes, I can't respond to everything. I said, well,
okay, but
the ones that matter,
you have to respond. There are people trying to sell you a product. You never met them. You have a relationship with a business colleague. Then you need to respond.
You need to respond. With that, we'll say cheers and thank you for coming.
Cheers. Thank you so.